lecturer with 23 years experience in the field. She is MUFON's Director of Abduction Research and on the Board of Directors of Starborn Support. For 10 years, can I have quiet now, please? Thank you. Okay. For 10 years, Kathy volunteered as MUFON's Director of Field Investigation and Investigator Training. In 2012, she was very appropriately the recipient of MUFON's Researcher of the Year Award. She earned a BA degree in social work with honors from the University of New Hampshire in 1971 and participated in graduate studies in education while working as a teacher and education, hold on one second. And Education Services Coordinator. She is also a certified hypnotherapist. Kathleen's interest in UFOs dates back to September 20th, 1961, when her aunt, Betty Hill, phoned her nearby home to report that she and Barney had encountered a flying saucer in New Hampshire's White Mountains. A primary witness to the evidence of the UFO encounter and the aftermath, Kathleen has in-depth knowledge of the Hills' biographical histories, personalities, and the previously unpublished historical files pertaining to their sensational story. In short, Kathleen Marden is the world's ranking expert on this seminally important case and the individuals involved in it. She is also the author of 3 books: Captured, The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, Science Was Wrong, with nuclear physicist, scientist, ufologist Stanton T. Friedman, and The Alien Abduction Files with Denise Stoner, which was just published in May of 2013, and absolutely essential to any library for anyone serious about the subject. Her chapters on alien abduction appear in UFOs and Aliens, Is There Anybody Out There?, and Children of the Graves. Her articles have been published in the MUFON UFO Journal, Open Minds Magazine, and on several websites. Kathy has appeared in television, National Geographic, Discovery, History Channels, as well as over 100 radio programs in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And she has lectured throughout the United States and is recognized as the world's leading expert, as I said, on the Hill abduction. Kathy was mentioned in Alien Nation, Have Humans Been Abducted by Extraterrestrials by Ralph Blumenthal, and in the online May 10th issue of the very prestigious Vanity Fair magazine. Kathy resides with her family in Central Florida and can be contacted at kmartin@aol.com. Her mailing address is Post Office Box 120, 172, Claremont, Florida, 34712. You can purchase her books or read some of her articles at kathleen-marden.com, and her phone numbers are available as well. Please extend a warm welcome to Kathleen Marden.
Hello, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Peter. My lecture today is on my new book with Denise Stoner, The Alien Abduction Files. And let's get started. This is Denise. Denise resides in Winter Park, Florida right now. And I met Denise 3.5 years ago. It's almost 4 years ago, I guess now, when I moved to Florida. We had corresponded via email prior to that. I had lived in New Hampshire, and we retired. Well, my husband retired to Florida. I certainly didn't retire, but I went with him. And I had been impressed with Denise. She was a member of Florida MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. She was their chief investigator. at that time. She was a state section director, and she was hosting meetings for the general public. So I decided that after I moved there, I would go to her meeting. And I did, and introduced myself. She saw me, and she said to herself, "That can't possibly be who I think it is." And sure enough, it was. And I then found out that she was hosting meetings, support group meetings for experiencers. And I asked her if I might be able to attend a meeting as well. And she invited me to come along. As I got to know Denise better, she invited me to her home for lunch one day. And I went over, and it was at about that time that Denise and I discovered that we had actually lived very close to one another in Colorado many years before that. And Denise told me about a daylight UFO sighting that she and her husband had. Her husband was attending college. It was a small college in Gunnison, Colorado, Western State College. And I was listening to what she was saying, and I was astounded because I lived about 20 miles away from her at that time, and discovered that we might have actually observed the same UFO on the same day. I was really impressed with Denise. She was a very credible person, articulate, stable, carries herself very, very well, observes confidentiality agreements, and eventually she confided to me that she was an experiencer, that she and her husband in 1982, this is Friday, August 13, 1982, had an abduction experience, a missing time experience. And I promised her that I would never tell anyone what she had told me. And I kept that promise for a very long time. Denise told me that she had had hypnosis in Colorado not long after she had that experience, but that the hypnotherapist she saw had passed away. All of her files, all of her records were gone. And she had very little memory of what had actually occurred. She only remembered something about a black hole, and that was about all she could remember at that point. And since I was a hypnotherapist, and I'm not in the business of this, but I have advanced training in regression, in post-traumatic stress disorder, in forensic hypnosis. And so I offered to facilitate Denise's memories because she really wanted to recall all that happened to her. So we started to work together. She would come to my house and we would do some hypnosis sessions. And you're going to see some of these sessions a little bit later in this presentation. So this is how we met and how we got started. I was working on a book very slowly. It was about a highly significant multi-generational abduction that I had been investigating in the state of New Hampshire over a multi-year period. Case of individuals that I found highly credible as well. A lot of conscious recall evidence, medical records, etc. And I was writing about that, and Denise impressed me so much. She told me that she had done some writing before, and I started thinking about it and how I really love working with a co-author so that we can give feedback to each other, we can share ideas. I view it as a social event. I'm not a person who enjoys being alone in an office, being totally isolated from other people. And Denise told me that she would write her story. And at that time, she was going to use a pseudonym. Well, lo and behold, we submitted the proposal for our book to the publisher, And as often happens, the publisher said, this book is not going to happen unless somebody comes forward and reveals their true identity. And we discussed it. Denise got in touch with her family, with her friends, and about a month later, she came back and said that she would do it. So this took a great deal of courage, and Denise did agree to come forward. And this is her story, in addition to the story of Jenny Henderson. This is Denise's husband, Ed. He was raised in Connecticut and then down south and also in the state of California. His father was a medical doctor, came from a nice family. Good, stable guy. He, as I said, was going to Western State College. Denise has an associate's degree in business, and she worked for the National Park Service. She also worked for the Navy as a training coordinator in Florida. She had a security clearance. And Denise became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter with cerebral palsy. And as a result of that, Ed had to drop out of college. They had overwhelming medical bills. And he's a very bright guy, very knowledgeable guy, ended up working and becoming a sales manager for a flooring company. At one time owned his own company too. Really nice couple. And this is their daughter, Dee Dee. She was 14 when they had their missing time experience. She was about 12 in this picture. There's Dee Dee. This is Denise when she was receiving an award for her work for the National Park Service. And Denise and Ed at that time lived in Arvada, Colorado, right up here. And every weekend during the warm months, they would travel through South Park Valley, down here to about 7 miles north of Buena Vista. And if you're from Colorado, you call it Buena Vista. And Denise's parents and a family friend lived in Colorado Springs. And they would travel over here. They all had camping trailers on a ranch on the Arkansas River. And they went there every weekend. Ed and Denise would leave work, and they'd leave at the same time every Friday, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And Denise's mother would have dinner ready for them, expecting them to arrive between 8 and 8:15. It was 137 miles. They had to travel over Kenosha Pass, a 10,000-foot high pass, then through South Park Valley, along Route 285, and then Trout Creek Pass at the other end of the valley. Once they got over Trout Creek Pass, Buena Vista was up here, and their camp was 7 miles north of there. This is Kenosha Pass. You can see how it winds around. There was a rest area right here. And Ed was very methodical. He had been in the military, and if he wasn't out for that long a period of time, he would always check distance. He would check time. He had set his trip odometer. He was testing his gas mileage on that evening. They always got out at this rest area and had a little snack and looked out over South Park Valley. And this is another view as they got back into the car and were heading down Kenosha Pass toward the little town of Jefferson. There's Jefferson right there. You don't pass directly through it. You pass a little bit to the left of it, or to the east of it. And Denise saw these two strange lights in the sky that suddenly appeared and caught her attention. It's about 6:30, 6:40 at night. And she continued to watch them as she went down to the valley floor. And here's Jefferson. They were 4 miles south of Jefferson when Ed checked his odometer. It was about 6:55 at night at that time. And the odometer read 74 miles. He knew he had 63 miles to go to reach his destination. And Denise stated that these lights were suddenly coming in very, very quickly toward the car. And she looked at Ed at that point and tried to point them out to him. But she said he was clinging onto the steering wheel with both hands and just staring straight ahead. And suddenly she felt the car lift up off the road and go to the side. And Ed also felt that. And as an investigator, the first thing I thought of was, well, maybe they just had an accident. Maybe they bumped their heads. You know, you have to be skeptical about these things. And as I investigated this case, all of that was resolved, and I became convinced that was not what actually happened. Ed and Denise and their car, their daughter and their little dog, were picked up by these crafts and carried out into the desert. You can see where the lights moved. The next thing they knew, and as if only a moment had passed, they found themselves at the other end of the valley on Trout Creek Pass. It was no longer 6:55 in the evening, it was now 11 o'clock. It was pitch black. They were cold. They had no idea how they'd gotten there. The headlights were turned on. Ed hadn't turned them on. Ed was hyperventilating. He was disoriented. He was perplexed. Denise was stunned, shaken beyond words. And Dee Dee, their daughter, was sound asleep in the back seat. And the trip odometer still read 74 miles. The exact figure that it read 40 miles before that, 4 miles south of Jefferson. This is a topographical map of their location. This is approximately where their car was placed back on the road. And this is their destination. Well, you can imagine what Denise's parents were thinking when they arrived, expecting them at 8 to 8:15, and now it was after 11 o'clock at night. Fortunately, Denise's mother was still alive. She's the only one of the adults who were still living. She's in her 80s now, but she gave me this statement. I was able to interview her, and she wrote regarding Denise and Ed. They were supposed to arrive at approximately 8:15 to 8:20. And when that time had passed, along with 3 more hours, Denise's dad and our longtime family friend became very worried. We all discussed going up to the ranch house to use the only phone to call the police to see if there had been an accident. The guys actually wanted to get into the car to start driving the route back to Denver to look for Ed's car. We were at a loss and began to walk down the dirt road from the camp toward the ranch house, knowing we were going to awaken the elderly lady who was a longtime caretaker of the ranch. Too much time had passed, and Ed knew the phone number, so would have stopped somewhere to call unless they were stuck in the middle of nowhere. But even then, at some point, a highway patrol or cross-country trucker would pass an automobile in trouble. Everyone was willing to help back then, especially a stranded driver in the dark. Just as we reached the turn in the road, the 3 of us spotted headlights in the distance, turning onto the ranch road. It was only minutes before we knew it was Ed's car. They pulled up and rolled down the window. We walked back to their trailer and asked them what had happened. Denise and Ed were confused because they realized it was so late. They had no explanation for their lateness. Denise's father teased. Our friend did the same. I always had to have an answer and they insisted they had no idea why they were so late and were searching for answers themselves. I'm not good with secrets, and I thought if they were keeping one, this was not a good time to do so. And she wrote, "This is what I recall about that night, Una Kent." This is Denise back in that time frame, just to show you what she looked like. And this was taken next to a river in Colorado. And now we're going to get on to the hypnosis sessions. As I said, I use forensic hypnosis technique. This is the only form of hypnosis that was at one time admissible in a court of law. It no longer is. No form of hypnosis is. I've had advanced training in working in regressive hypnosis and also in working with experiencers. I trained a little bit under Bud Hopkins one weekend when I stayed at his apartment in New York, and a variety of other people shared ideas and have developed techniques that work well for me. We have to remember that, as Michael mentioned, there are some problems with the use of hypnosis. You might confabulate, particularly if the hypnotist asks leading questions, or if you have a lot of knowledge about the abduction phenomenon. You might confabulate a story. That's possible. But I was fortunate that I was able to hypnotize Ed and Denise separately. And I took Dr. Simon's lead because he had done this kind of technique with my aunt and uncle. And so I induced amnesia, and so I was able to get a statement from each of them about what they recalled separately. Ed told me, and let me say first that Ed insisted that if he found out he had actually been abducted, he didn't want to know what happened. He didn't want to risk trauma. And so I took him only to a certain point, and we'll get into that. But he became disoriented. He sensed that his car had stopped, and he feels momentum, and he sees swirling dust-like particles surrounding his car as if he's in a vortex. And this is where he is describing what happened 4 miles south of Jefferson. He hears a high-pitched pulsing, whining, and then he feels weightlessness, as if he is detached from his body. He's paralyzed, and his head is full of random, spinning, analyzing thoughts. He finds himself in a new environment, and he sees the smooth, dull, reflective ceiling overhead. He senses a feeling of detachment, and he doesn't know where Denise and Dee Dee are. Then, I had actually hypnotized Denise earlier, and this is what Denise stated she observed in the desert when the car was put down. There was an ET standing there, a gray, that she recognized. He was familiar to her. She'd seen him many, many times. And come to find out, I found out over time that Denise believes that she has been taken since she was 2.5 years old. And Denise said that there were 3 lights that sort of separated and floated free and reattached to the craft. And she felt that maybe it was almost like a gelatinous substance that she stepped into and was absorbed into, and then she could feel her body as if it were coming apart into a million pieces. And the next thing she knew, she found herself inside this craft. So actually, I just told you all of this. she heard a voice saying to her, "You'll be all right. We're going in now." She said that all along the hallway there were grays, the little short ones. And something in her head said, "Those are soldiers." She said, "I didn't think anything of it." And they were just looking straight ahead, not moving, not saying anything, just standing there. And she was escorted through this curved hallway toward a doorway. And standing in that doorway was a very frightening figure. Denise did not want to go there. We ended the session, and we went back about 2 months later. I gave her post-hypnotic suggestions to help her to overcome fear that she might experience about this. I asked her to call me if she had any difficulty with this, that we would talk about it. And eventually, she came to the point where she felt that she wanted to go on and to re-experience what had happened in that room. This is Denise's, the way Denise described to me her escort, the little gray guy that about 5 feet tall that she has seen all of her life. And then this is the one that she was so fearful of. You can see her sketch. And Stephen Smith, who is a professional artist, did the one on the right. She said it had a gray tint, a little bit of tan. It looked bumpy, but it wasn't. It was more modeled in appearance. Its eyes were vertical, and she said that they opened and closed like this. I see a lot of people shaking their heads, yes. This was Denise's sketch of the ET's body. He was very tall, at least 6 feet tall, maybe taller than that. He was the doctor. She found herself on a table, and her escort was up by her head. He comforted her, and this doctor was down at the other end. And in a moment, you're going to hear Denise describe what happened under hypnosis. This was not the first session you're going to hear. We decided that it was so important that you be able to hear her and see her in hypnosis that we did some later sessions that we videotaped. We had audio taped the first ones. So, let's see, here we go. And what happened next?
I had on jeans, I wore jeans always then. He just unsnapped the button and the zipper, pulled that back and just drove that needle. It came down from somewhere over here. It looked similar to a dentist's drill, but the big needle was on the end and he just took it, turned it, and put it right in. It took something.
Can you describe that needle?
It was hollow, and it was big. Let me see. It was at least as big as pencil lead. And hollow, and he took something from me. He did not inject something in, he took something out. And I could feel it.
Was there only this needle, or was there anything else that you observed?
No, it was apparatus. The needle was attached to something that had, he manipulated it, and it had an arm and a joint, and it bent from that, and it came from, I think, the wall. It appeared all of a sudden, and when he was done, it went away just like it appeared. I don't know where it went into the wall, I think.
Okay. And you can go on.
I do not remember how I was taken off the table. I do not remember, but I was suddenly on my feet. And there was a mental exchange.
Going to get down to the next session. Oh, in just a minute. She said she was told that when they extracted this ova from her, that it was for hybridization. And that they said, we get to keep some of their experiments, but it's the ones that fail for them, that we get to keep their mistakes, she said. So some women are impregnated by them and give birth to human hybrids. But there's something about those babies that they reject, that are not exactly what they want. She said they're doing no harm and are just working for a larger program. They're watching for changes in our DNA structure that might be caused environmentally and could lead to the disintegration of our species. It's for our own survival. Denise had a tour of the central core of the craft as well. They also did an implant. They inserted it through her foot up into her leg and then extracted it. They said that it was so that they would better be able to track her. And so now Denise is taken on a tour of the craft. Whoops. Let's click on this. Here we go.
As I walked in the hallway, the colors don't change, the lighting doesn't change, it's dim. You cannot see where the lighting comes from. It's just there. Seems to seep out of where seams should be, only there are no seams, it's all smooth. And we go to an opening, and I start to sense a pulsating feeling, and a feeling of something to do with my nerves or nerve endings. And I don't say anything. And we turn to the right. There's a little hallway. And I look down. And the floor is liquid. It's just floors in motion. It's almost like a hallucination or something you would see. I don't know if you can see it. And it's red. But different shades of red. It's black and it's red and it's moving. And I follow it.
Can you tell me, is it actually, the floor itself actually moving, or is there something under the floor?
It's under.
Okay, thank you.
But there's a path that prevents you from walking on it. In the center. And I walk in, And it's hard to walk in. It feels like two opposing ends of a magnet. And it's hard to walk in against it. I feel like I want to fall over, only I can't. Like I'm tipping. And I push against it. And I am looking at my feet. And at the floor. And I begin to see tubing, twisting and curling, and more twisting, and I see a center piece, and I know whether he's told me or it's intuitive or it's a combination of both, that this is a biological entity, that it's organic, that it's living, and that it's affecting me physically. It's pushing against me. And the doctor says, now this is what runs this particular craft. And I'm finding it difficult to stay there. And it's pushing my muscles.
You don't have to experience it now. You can just look at it from a distance and describe it. Your muscles can calm down.
And he says, the crafts like these, that these can communicate with each other and do. And they run the craft. The entities don't have a thing to do with how this whole thing operates. And I'm not a scientist. And I'm not good at describing with what I'm being told. And this whole thing is alive, and it's like walking into someone's body, into their being. And this thing has feelings and thoughts and emotion, although nothing else in the ship does.
How do you know that this is true?
It's something I feel. I feel their thoughts. I'm feeling emotions that aren't mine. And it makes me want to grieve for this being.
The first time that Denise underwent hypnosis and relived this tour of the craft, her body was behaving as if she were being hit by maybe little sandbags or baseballs, and her limbs were just jumping around. It was a little bit frightening for me, I have to say, because I had never had this kind of experience with anyone under hypnosis before. Very, very distressing to me. I didn't sleep well for a few nights after that, thinking about the possibility that that craft might be alive. This is Denise's diagram of the craft and the interior. You can see the craft up here. And this is the area that she thought was the biological portion. And you saw her go like this. She was describing sort of like piping that was going up. There was movement in the floor here. So this is what she drew. I wanted to check this out. Denise did not know this, but I had talked to many experiencers before, and these were some of the statements that I received and have received from them. The mothership and the scout ships were both biological and mechanical. The physicality of the equipment was there, but you also had to use your mental abilities to move things. Anonymous. This craft is operated mainly biologically. Its interior section is alive. It can think. Anonymous. The craft seems to have its own intelligence. It can sense its surroundings. Anonymous. Biological material is used deep within the energy system of the craft. Anonymous. These craft are living entities much like bacteria. They live, breathe, function, and create. They are grown from what was initially a hybrid framework. The craft are generic, genetically modified structures. Not all craft have individual operators, but there are certain parts of their DNA replicated. And Denise said that not all craft seem to have this biological center, that there are other types of craft that might not be like this. She said, now the taller of the grays has come, and I'm told that if I'm willing, that I can get through the opening. This is the opening that she was taken through initially, when she was taken on board the craft. She's told that because it will work without the substance. She said, he stands behind me. He puts his hands on my shoulders, and I touch the desert floor. She then said, I just find myself sitting in the seat. My feet are on the ground, and the door is open. And then I put my feet in, and the door closes. This is to the car. And I cannot find how we are suddenly at the top of the pass. Ed stated that he hears a frequency in the tenor range that reminds him of loud tinnitus. There's a heavy pulsation, and he feels frightened and cold. His weight returns, and he finds himself clinging to his steering wheel. It is suddenly dark outside, and he is freezing. His headlights are on, but he hasn't turned them on. He realizes that he's halfway up Trout Creek Pass. It's 11 p.m., and Denise is, quote, freaking out. This is Denise during that time frame, when they lived in Gunnison, Colorado. Just before that, they were living in Arvada when this occurred. And over time, I have been investigating recurring experiences that Denise is having. And I wanted to tell you about this one. It's not in our book, The Alien Abduction Files, because it occurred on February 2nd of this year. And Denise and I had gone to a meeting. That meeting was a MUFON meeting in St. Petersburg, Florida. My father was with us. We had gone to hear Paula Harris talk. She was down there preparing for a conference that we were going to be having in Florida. And so we went to the meeting. We had a light dinner with the people who attended. And then we started driving back toward Orlando. Now, Denise lives over here in the Winter Park area, and I live over in this area. So we always drive our cars to a parking lot right here in Winter Garden. And she gets into my car and I do the driving all of the time. So we drove down and we're returning home. And for some reason, the GPS system in my car started malfunctioning. Kept telling me to turn off the highway. This never happens. And so I finally, I turned off by accident, and I realized that I shouldn't have. I've driven that route over and over again, pulled back on, and I kept doing this, and then I pulled over again, and I turned it off. And just about that time, Denise said, well, I better call my husband. So she picked up her cell phone. It had been fully charged, and suddenly the cell phone completely discharged and went dead. Well, I had my cell phone with me. It hadn't been turned on at all. So I gave it to her and said, turn it on, you can use it. And we drove on. And all of a sudden I felt like, is my perception off? Am I really, really tired? I feel like the car has just been put down and I'm going up this hill. And so I thought, well, yeah, I'm tired. I've done a lot of driving today. And so I took Denise back and dropped her off at the parking lot. Denise wears an insulin pump. And as she's driving away, the insulin pump sounded, the battery in the insulin pump was dead. It was a 3-month battery. It was a new battery. There's no reason that that battery should have gone dead. Denise decided to take a shortcut. And this is the shortcut she was going to take. Here's the road right here, back to her house. This is Lake Baldwin. Something happened along the way. It was much later when she arrived home than she anticipated. She didn't remember the trip home. Her husband noted that she was late. She just suddenly sort of found herself approaching her house and into her driveway. And she discovered that the next day that she had a large black and blue mark on her leg. And she had these memories, these vague memories of an abduction experience. And she called me and she told me that she had a tri-field meter and that she was going to go out and check the dashboard of her car because it was malfunctioning. And she discovered that there was a very high electromagnetic field reading on the dashboard of her car. So I said to Denise, will you come over to my house, please? I'd like to see that for myself as your investigator. So we arranged for her to come to my house. And we said, well, maybe we'll do a little hypnosis too and find out if anything happened. So that's how all of this started. And under hypnosis, Denise found herself in this area. You can see this wooded area way over on the other side of the lake. Her car was stopped. She was just sitting there, and she saw a fiery orb, a red-orange orb, come up out of the lake, out of Lake Baldwin. And it passed over, and it hovered over another small lake, which is right here. And then the next thing she knew, an entity, that old familiar gray entity, stepped out from behind the tree. And then she found herself on board the craft, and she was taken down a hallway. And as she passed by one of the rooms, she glanced, and there was a woman seated on a bench. And this woman was wearing a sweater and a scarf. And there was also an old man seated on another bench, and he was balding. And she didn't really get a good look at them. She was taken into an examining room, and an implant was inserted into her. Apparently they took an old one out and they put in a new one. And then she found herself back at home or close to it. This is Lake Baldwin. This is another photograph of the area. This is a 7-inch bruise that Denise found on her upper thigh. I took the photograph of this. And Denise had her tri-field meter, so she showed me the malfunction on the dashboard and the high electromagnetic field reading. And I took the tri-meter into my house, and I started to play with it. I put it on my dining room table, and I started moving it around, and it makes a little bit of a screeching noise when you first turn it on, and then it goes down to 0 again. But it didn't do that. I set it on the electrical setting, and it continued to screech. It continued to move to full capacity. And so I thought, boy, maybe there's a strong electrical field in my house. And so, or maybe I should check outside. Well, there was no storm outside. And I started moving this around my house to different locations. And I discovered that if Denise or I went near it, it was still doing that. And I thought, this is really freaky. I think we'd better get some more people in here, because maybe this is malfunctioning. And I said, we have to take our watches off. She had to take her insulin pump off. We tried all of those experiments. And then we had my husband come, and it behaved normally for him. And she took it home, and she tested it with her husband and with her daughter and with a friend, and behaved normally with all of them. So this was a little perplexing. These are photographs of the needle going to full capacity. And that's about all I'm going to say about that. And we have to get on and move along to the Jenny Henderson missing time case in New Hampshire. Jenny grew up in Seacoast, New Hampshire, and she became a teacher and a high school teacher. She lived up in northern New Hampshire for a time. And it seems that this is a multi-generational abduction experience. She and her mother, her family were taken when she was young, and she continued to be taken when she moved up north where she was teaching. The first conscious missing time event that she had occurred when she was a teenager, and she and a friend were going to a high school basketball game. And they were headed down this road in southern New Hampshire toward the high school when all of a sudden a craft came in very, very rapidly and hovered over the vehicle. And she rolled down her window, and she was teasing her friend and saying, "Oh, it's a UFO." She didn't really believe that it was. She thought it was a helicopter. And the motor died. The car stalled. She remembered her friend being panicky. The next thing she remembered, she was searching around the car as if maybe she was missing something. They continued on to the high school, and when they arrived, the high school was closed. There were no cars in the yard. Hours had passed. Jenny went home and said to her parents that they'd seen a UFO, and her mother said to her, "Don't ever tell anybody about this." And she did for years and years. She was supposed to pick her brother up and take her brother home that night. She was a good kid, and because her brother had to find a ride home from somebody else. As time went on, she realized that she was being used probably as a breeder. This is her sketch of a room that she was taken into on one of her abductions. She saw these cylindrical-shaped tanks containing fetuses in various stages of development. She was taken and placed on a table in the next room. And what I'm going to talk to you about today, the rest of it is all in the book, is a highly significant nocturnal event that occurred on January 16, 1988. Under hypnosis, and she did have a lot of conscious recall of this, but under hypnosis she stated, "I thought it was over, but they're back, and they're down by the foot of my bed. There are 3 of them. I can see their eyes. They're shining, glistening. They have glistening eyes. I don't want this to go on again." And then she screamed, "Don't, 3 times. She said, "I can't move. I'm up. I'm moving. I'm up." I was lying down, but all of a sudden I'm up. I'm going toward the window, through to the outside. Now, in conscious recall, she and her husband recalled someone coming into their bedroom. They thought that it was Jenny's daughter or her son who had come in the middle of the night. But her husband sprung up out of the bed and then was very swiftly put back down into the bed. And then the beings came and what I just read occurred. This is a sketch of what she remembered occurring. There were 3 of them. They floated her out through this large window and up to a waiting craft. When she arrived on the craft, she saw her 2 children. What had woken her that night, and the rest of the family, was her boxer dog. The dog was barking and barking. It was a vigilant, kind of a watchdog. Her house had been broken into a couple of times, so they got this protective dog. And then, as if in midstream, the barking stopped. And then this event started to occur. When she was on board the craft, she was taken in by these ones that she called assistants or guards, about 3.5, 4 feet tall, large heads. And then there was another type, the escorts or the guides. This is the type who is with you throughout your lifetime. These are the ones who are the doctors or the educators or the scientists. They're intelligent, a lot more intelligent than the smaller ones. He stood by her head and he reassured her. He told her he loved her. He made her feel comfortable. She lost all fear. And she was terrified when she was in her house. So this is her just being taken into the room. She said, as she was on this table, they said to her, they communicated to me that I am performing an important function for them. That it is helping them to understand more about us, and they need to take my genetic material. They have this. It's like a probe, and there's a wire or a tube connected to it. I think it's something about vibrational frequency. They have to stimulate my harmonic vibrational frequency. I don't know what they're talking about. Jenny's not a New Age person. She's just an average member of the community. You would never know that she's having these experiences. Her husband's a prominent businessman, and that's why she's using a pseudonym for this book. She didn't know what was going on here. This is what she described looking up at. You can see her guide, her escort, up by her head, reassuring her, and then the doctor down at the other end, getting ready to do the procedures. This is what she said she felt. She said there is a pulse that moves up through my body, almost like a vibration. It's a little painful. I feel a tingling energy passing through me. There's an energy moving through me. He's touching my temples and my cheeks and over my eyes and is calming me down. I need to learn that they are doing no harm. I'm part of them. I was born. Before I was born, they inserted a tiny fragment of themselves into me. They did a mind scan, she said. He put his eyes close to mine, and I felt intense love coming from him. I've never experienced such a powerful feeling directed at me before. He told me that I'm part of them, that I am family. I have no reason to be fearful or to distrust them. They mean no harm. And the way she described it is that this feeling was projected upon her. It wasn't a demonstration of affection. It wasn't the way you and I interact. It was a projection of this intense love into her mind. She was also shown an image on a screen when her physical examination was over, and this is the image that she observed. It was like she was moving toward a brown, either a sun or a planet. She didn't know what it was. She saw something that was kind of pink on the outside and darker on the inside, and we don't know what that is all about. She's wondering if perhaps she was being shown their planet, and that perhaps their planet was dying. Perhaps they live underground. She kind of got that sense. Perhaps something had happened and their planet was destroyed long ago. I know other people interpret this as being shown an image of Earth in the future, but it was her opinion that she was being shown their planet. So, last night, if you were here, you heard me mention someone who I believe had radiation exposure, and that was Jenny. And she might have accidentally been exposed to radiation during that one experience in 1988, because when she was returned in the morning, she had burn marks on the tops of her shoulders. They were triangular in shape, and she had a sunburn kind of effect on her back. She got up, there was blood on her pillow, there was blood on her children's pillows as well. She stepped into the shower, and her body felt like it was burning. Her eyes were tearing, and red trails were running down her cheeks. She developed conjunctivitis. Her eyes were burning. She became ill after that. She lost hair. That morning, she was in the kitchen. Everything she touched burned out. Every piece of electrical equipment, starting with lights she turned on, her electric mixer, one thing after another. She walked past her son's handheld computer game, and it turned on automatically and started playing. So all of these things are going on. She's becoming very upset. She thinks that her experiences had ended several years before that, but now they're back in her life. And her son walks out of his bedroom, and he says to her, "Mom, you know how I never believed in UFOs? Now I know they're real." And she said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "You know what I mean. Last night." And then he turned on his heel and went into his room. She followed him in, and there was blood on his pillow. She then went upstairs to check her young daughter, and her daughter was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. and said, "Mom, I almost woke you up last night because there was an airplane right outside my bedroom window, and I could even see the people on it. But I didn't wake you up because I didn't want to disturb you. But I feel like I haven't slept all night long, and I had these crazy dreams about being taken out, 10 minutes, about being taken out into this funny little house. And there was this funny little guy out there, and he kept me awake and played games with me all night long. And there was blood on her pillow as well." And so the story went on, and it's all in the alien abduction files over many, many years. This had a profound effect upon Jenny and her children because they became terrified after that. And it took many, many years for them to work through this experience and to come to a point where they can now accept it and look upon it with curiosity. One of the questions that I wanted to know is, that I asked is this scientifically possible for a human body to pass through a solid surface? And so I asked 3 physicists about this. And this was the best response that I got, and I actually took it right off from out of an email message that I received. And this physicist said, in order to pass a human body through a solid object, both the body and the solid surface need to vibrate at an equally high frequency. And we know that everything has a vibrational frequency. Nothing is completely solid. The human body has a higher vibrational frequency than that wall or that window. And he wrote, remember, 99.9% of an atom is empty space between the protons and electrons. So it's just a matter of getting things in alignment to get them to interpenetrate, making it possible for matter to pass through matter. The trick is to match up both frequency and phase of the human and the solid object. We've already done something like this in the laboratory. So, what did Denise and Jenny have in common with other experiencers? Denise and I did a study in the year 2012. I actually spoke about it last year at this conference where 50 experiencers and a 25-person control group participated in this. And we found out of 45 questions, there were 23 commonalities. And some of the 23 are listed in the book, but these are some of them. Both Jenny and Denise were taken more than 10 times, they believed. They were under 20 when they were taken for the first time, and the vast majority are. They were not alone when they were taken. They had conscious recall of at least part of their experience. They had conscious recall of entities outside their home during one of their abduction experiences at least. Witnesses saw the craft on at least one occasion. They received telepathic messages. They were given a gift of healing, and they developed new psychic abilities. And the vast majority of experiencers who participated in this study said that after their first experience, they developed these psychic abilities. They felt that the ETs had done something that had caused this within them. 83% woke up with unexplained marks on their bodies immediately after a nocturnal bedroom abduction. It was only 21% for the non-abductees in the control group. These are some of the marks that I've collected on the bodies of experiencers. You can see these triangular marks. They remind me of what was on Jenny's body, on her shoulders. This is actually Denise's scar right here from a triangular mark that was healing. Here's another one, triangular black and blue mark. You'll recognize this as a scoop mark. And I hope you can see this. These are what appear to be 3 long fingerprints. This, I don't know, and she didn't know, if this was done by some kind of mechanical equipment or if it was actually fingerprints impressed into the flesh. But that photograph was taken immediately when this experiencer was returned. She was awake. She checked her body out. I asked everybody who contacts me to do that, to keep a diary or a journal. Record everything that you remember immediately after it happens, because you tend to forget very rapidly. Other things that people who participated in our study stated was 40% suffer from migraine headaches. It's less than 1% in the non-abductees. 74% now have difficulty falling asleep and remaining asleep. We've been working on this with Denise because it's such a common problem. She's even been asking the ETs for healing and trying to send that message to them. And now she is able to sleep through the night. This is brand new. It's happened within the past couple of months, so we're very grateful for that. 56% are more sensitive to light than they were prior to their abduction. 38% have chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome that seems to come, and it seems to have developed after people started to be taken through solid surfaces. I haven't been able to find it back in the days when people were walked to the craft. This is less than 1% in the general population. And then paranormal and electromagnetic field phenomena. 88% experience paranormal phenomena in their homes. Light orbs that sometimes popped into ETs. Doors that opened and closed on their own shortly after an abduction experience. Things flying through the air, flying off the shelves shortly after an abduction experience. I wonder if it has something to do with that strong electrical field or electromagnetic field in 2 experiencers that we've been able to measure. And I'm hoping that more people will actually do those measurements and let me know. So we'll know if there's anything to this. Electrical equipment malfunctions. And as I said, both Jenny and Denise had all 23 of the commonalities that experiencers share. Now, many people have been talking about the ascension, and what is the ascension? And this will be the end. This is my speculation. I noted that experiencers and hybrids are stated to have increased telepathy, increased empathy, increased tuition and psychic ability, increased intellectual functioning, sometimes telekinesis, and sometimes healing abilities shortly after an experience, and sometimes this carries throughout a person's life. So I developed just some speculations about what all of this means. I might be right and I might be totally wrong, but I thought that perhaps they're attempting to create a human race that is more compatible with their own characteristics. Perhaps they're attempting to produce humans who can communicate with them, and that's why people become more telepathic. And perhaps they're creating humans with more of a collective consciousness than we have now, but more like the collective consciousness that they have. And one quick question. A person wrote to me and asked me to ask this question. It's a question from Paul. And he said, does anyone remember a UFO landing that occurred in Portland in either 1974 or 1975? It caused a power blackout and was witnessed by numerous people. His brother visited the landing site the next day and saw scorched earth on the parking lot behind PJ Merrill's Seafood. at 681 Forest Avenue. So could I see a show of hands if anyone in the audience actually did remember that UFO landing? Nobody. Okay, thank you. And these are my products, and at 4 o'clock we're coming back for Stanton Friedman's lecture. Thank you very much.